Beginning in the 1980s, a belief has slowly taken over the world. That neoliberal globalization, with its built-in self-regulating mechanisms, would finally do away with old institutions like the state and the military, and would usher the planet into an era of relative peace and prosperity.
Free trade will bring on a Great Depression.
9/11 and the current economic crisis have shown that belief to be largely a myth. But many signs were already there. Markets have always relied on state power and military might. America's transformation from republic to economic superpower following World War II was accompanied by the creation of a global network of military bases, unlike any other in history. According to the Pentagon's Base Structure Report, today these amount to 716 in 38 countries. More than 250,000 soldiers are stationed on these bases. In addition to this, the US has a military presence in 110 countries around the world. A year after his election, Barack Obama approved the new administration's first military budget. This amounts to $680 billion, $30 billion more than Bush's last defense budget, and almost equaling the $787 billion set aside by the new administration for the economic crisis stimulus package. Why, despite the crisis, does the military budget keep growing? Are crises and military expansion related in some way?
When we have different presentations or sometimes bands that come, or even when we have talent night, if we have people that want to show off their talent, we have a stage. We've done all sorts of things here, from a Halloween party, there's Christmas parties, there's other events that happen here at this center as well. Yeah, they have salsa classes, so I've never taken a salsa class.
In the early 21st century, military bases, the network of military bases all around the world, forms the new empire that the United States is trying to build. When you look at the Pentagon's website and their public information, they acknowledge having somewhere over 700 military bases scattered among about 130 countries. That's astonishing. That's astonishing. Most Americans have no idea. There are more than 250,000, more than 250,000 U.S. troops stationed on these bases all around the world.
It's not illegal to tape, but I gotta respect the manager's point of view. Those are the movies that we have, and the movies are free.
The unit of empire in the classic European empires was the colony. The unit for the American empire is not the colony, it's the military base.
Bases are the empire. They're the point of projection of power and expansion of power. Most people don't understand that the bases exist, don't understand the functions of military bases, and it's frankly, it's much easier for people to engage with things like an atrocious war in Iraq, the question of torture, things that immediately outrage them.
These are internet stations where soldiers can not only check the internet, but they also have the capability of doing webcams back home. You can go in.
To focus on war and not war preparation is to simply shovel after the elephant. One has to look at the war preparations that are going on around the world, which military bases are central to. If one doesn't pay attention to that, then again, we can only deal with the symptoms, which is warfare. There's a saying that goes, when soldiers come, war comes.
で米軍がそこに沖縄に入ってきたら大昔はこの鐘をねこういうのでどんどん叩いて追っ払ったわけ。そしたらヤンキーってみんな追っ払う。これ米軍基地というのは土地だけ奪ったんじゃなくして人の命も奪ってね文化も歴史もみんな奪ってるわけだからこれは許してならん。で世界の平和のために基地を使うとか言うけれども朝鮮戦争っていうのがあったでしょ。ベトナム戦争あるいはイラクそこら辺をよく見ると必ず人を殺してるわけね。で人を殺すために自分たちの土地が使われるのに非常に心が痛い。コックに私は料理するから包丁貸してくれんかって言ったら貸してもいいけれども人を殺すから包丁貸してって言ったらこれ殺人だから私の土地だから返してくれというのを日本語で書きました。
World War II marked the birth of America's global empire of bases. For Germany, Italy, and Japan, the defeat was followed by the establishment of a permanent American presence that continues to this day. Nowhere is this clearer than in Okinawa, a little island south of the Japanese mainland, which after the war remained under US administration until 1972, when the island was returned to Japan. In those years, the US established dozens of military bases on the island. Today, along with South Korea and due to its proximity to China and Taiwan, Okinawa still represents America's military stronghold in East Asia. The island hosts 38 US bases, which house a force of 35,000 soldiers. The growing tension between the US and the Soviet Union following the war led to an unprecedented global military buildup and to a strategy of exploitation of people's fears that in various forms has continued to this day.
You know how bad sunburn can feel. The atomic bomb flash could burn you worse than a terrible sunburn, especially where you're not covered.
In those years, America expanded into new territories. Such is the case of Diego Garcia, a small island in the Indian Ocean, part of the British Overseas Territories, whose inhabitants got caught up in the global power struggle.
Nobody seems to know that Diego Garcia used to have a very considerable population that was all entirely bundled up and shipped out in order to, as the US Navy put it, sanitize the place.
The US wanted a base in the Indian Ocean at all cost because of the Cold War. Diego Garcia has a most wonderful, lagoon that would really be the ideal place for a base. So we were at the wrong place, at the wrong place at that time, because that place was the best place for the most sophisticated US and UK base outside of the US and the UK.
In 1971, due to an agreement between the UK and the US, the British made the island available to the Americans as a military base because of its geostrategic position, and deported its 2,000 inhabitants. Today, according to the Pentagon, Diego Garcia is one of the 13 major US military bases in the world and has played a crucial role in all post-9/11 conflicts. The Diego Garcia exiles today live scattered between Mauritius and the United Kingdom, where for years they have been fighting a legal battle to return to their island. In 2008, though, the House of Lords overruled all the cases previously won by the islanders, which upheld their right of return.
We had to suffer exile for defense purposes. And we paid that price, and that price is to be exiled from your homeland for the defense of the West.
To a substantial degree, in one form or another, socialism has spread the shadow of human regimentation over most of the nations of the earth, and the shadow is encroaching upon our own liberty.
I was certainly a Cold Warrior. I thought that the Soviet Union was a menace. I still do. I still believe that we had every right to try and defend ourselves against the power of the Soviet Union. I began to change. I got new information after the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991. Above all, how fast our country moved, the United States, to find a replacement enemy, to keep the military-industrial complex functioning, to serve the vested interests in the Cold War system. I was appalled by this. I believe that we should have had, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, that eliminated any basis for this global apparatus. There was no further reason for it. It was irrelevant. Instead, they moved at once to find another enemy: China, terrorism, drug lords, even instability, anything to keep it going.
We need an enemy. It's like we were a football team and we've been practicing to play a game. We learned certain plays, and now we don't have any opponent. You know, how can we play this game anymore? And so they needed a new enemy. And the new enemy, well, for a while it was drugs. We had a war on drugs. But then came terrorism, and that was a very good substitute in the minds of our leaders.
Sometimes we're afraid of big things, and sometimes we're afraid of very little ones. But now there's something else about fear that I don't think you quite understand, Billy.
What's that?
Well, sometimes when you become afraid, there isn't anything that's really dangerous. Sometimes you think things are dangerous when they're not.
John Stockwell, a former CIA agent, wrote, I think, a very prescient book called In Search of Enemies, in which he identified different eras in the U.S. society where the propaganda machine was geared up to identify a particular enemy of the moment, in order that the U.S. public would support a military buildup or support a particular war.
What a worldwide network of bases means that you have at your fingertips, if you are the Emperor of the West, the means of a perpetual war. There's always somebody we don't like and somebody who must be stopped. Perpetual war for perpetual peace is being the American dream. Once we were launched upon empire, we would never look back. And we would always find a pretext to attack an enemy.
Targeting is an intricate process. Many things are considered. We have advanced weapon systems with precision munitions, and we take care in matching the appropriate ordnance to produce the desired effect on a target.
The foundations for the New World Order were laid in the Middle East in 1991. Following the First Gulf War, the US established a permanent military presence in the Middle East, much like it had done 50 years earlier in Europe and East Asia. The true consequences of this policy would be seen only 10 years later. In 2001, Osama bin Laden cited the US military presence in his homeland, Saudi Arabia, as a reason for his hatred of the United States. In a curious twist of fate, though, the 9/11 attacks and America's military response paved the way for the birth of new military bases in Iraq and Central Asia, first and foremost in Afghanistan.
The relationship between bases and war is a hand-in-glove relationship. Bases, most of the U.S. bases, I would say the majority, are the result of war. They are the booty or loot of war, in the sense that they were captured during wartime and never given back.
Following the U.S. bombing of Iraq in 1991, the United States wound up with military bases in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Oman, and the United Arab Emirates. Following its bombing of Yugoslavia in 1999, the U.S. wound up with military bases in Kosovo, Albania, Bulgaria, Macedonia, Hungary, Bosnia, and Croatia. Following its bombing of Afghanistan in 2001 and 2002, the U.S. wound up with military bases in Afghanistan, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Georgia, Yemen, and Djibouti. Following its bombing and invasion of Iraq in 2003, the United States wound up with Iraq.
Staying behind, I believe, is actually is the ultimate purpose of many of these wars. We used to think of military bases being built in order to wage the wars, and I think increasingly we see the wars themselves as convenient opportunities to station the bases and to have a more permanent presence in countries such as Iraq, such as Afghanistan, such as Kosovo.
Also have some freeways. What we have in here is video games. Number 9 and Diet Coke.
Special Macintosh. I'm with 2-135 Task Force Bayonet, 1st Platoon. We run patrols daily, just keeping a safe and secure environment. I wanted to be in the Army for quite a long time. And when I hit that age, I was like, well, it's a good way to pay for college, get to do something I wanted to do for a long time, and guns, doing this active, I never wanted a desk job, so it had to be infantry for me, something where I could be moving around, constantly doing something active. So.
How do you feel about being deployed to Iraq or Afghanistan?
I'm nervous, but I'm ready. If I get called to go, I think it'd be another exciting experience for me.
Find the baton! Find the baton! Find the baton! Find the baton!
Well, the U.S.-Japan Security Alliance is the cornerstone of America's defense posture in the Asia-Pacific. And the United States is both a trans-Pacific and a transatlantic power. But we couldn't project that power without the men and women who serve here in Japan. As we look at the region, it is at peace, but we have threats like what we hear every day from North Korea. And the security mission is essential to continuing to undergird America's leadership and being prepared for the kind of challenges we face, but also to seize the opportunities for a better future.
In 2009, after years of local protests, US Secretary of State Clinton signed an agreement with the Japanese government to move the 8,000 troops stationed in the Futenma Air Base to the island of Guam, a US territory. The move, though, is tied to the construction of a new airstrip on the eastern coast of Okinawa, in Hinoko Bay. The project follows the decision to expand the Jungle Warfare Training Center in Takai, further north. In short, the US has agreed to return some land to the locals, but only if they accept to give up more land elsewhere on the island.
このジュゴの食べる海藻は沖縄県でもですね、ここが一番良好に育っていると言われている沖縄県が認めている場所なんです。サンゴ礁が発達して天然の防波堤の役割を果たしている。海岸線が守られているということと、それと同時にこのジュゴの食べる海藻がここに繁茂するのは穏やかな内海があるからなんです。という米軍の海兵隊の基地です。で、彼らはなぜここに来るかというと、ここがアメリカ本国で海兵隊を没収するパンフレットに使われているわけです。その建物を一部壊してですね、今度はこの海を2000メーター、辺野古の方から大良湾、この岬をまたいで2000メーター埋め立てる計画が今あるわけなんですけど、
これらの具体的な、環境や人間へのインパクト、これは世界的に見ても貴重な生物が生息している場所ですが、それを破壊する影響というのは、この沖縄島のジュゴンというのは東アジアに唯一ある個体群です。孤立した個体群でわずか50頭以下しか今では生きていないと言われています。
キャンプ宿泊の中で1年間朝から11時ぐらいまで、5時ぐらいから11時ぐらいまでですね、ノーニューベースという看板を持ってずっとやってたこともあったんですけども、その時にやっぱりね、いろいろ話しかけてきた彼らからその朝の弁当のそのハンバーグとか、だからその別に彼ら自身も若い子なんでね、そのイラク行ってイラク人をこう殺すことを目的としているようには思えなかったんですけども、こういうやっぱり人殺し、人を殺す訓練をこのままにしてはいけないと、そのことをなんとか妨げる行動をすればここに4つは作られないと、もう年ですから、だからこれずっと座り込んでるということです。
We have a lot of challenges, but we also have some real opportunities. And it's up to each of us to determine the role that we will play on behalf of our country and our leadership. But I have every confidence that when it comes to defending America's security and advancing our interests, we have nobody better than all of you. So thank you, and thanks to your families. Thanks for the service and the sacrifice. And thanks for making a difference every day.
By militarism, we do not mean national defense or the obligation of citizenship for able-bodied people to defend the country in times of national emergency. We mean a way of life, a way of making a living, an ideological position, Originally, our conception of American military was like the early Roman legions of the Republic. They were raised for an emergency. Farmers left their fields, went to war, and were instantaneously demobilized. They were not long service forces of any sort. As the Roman Republic slowly, inadvertently, thoughtlessly acquired themselves an empire, they began to realize they needed standing armies. Something like that happened in America after World War II, as we began to build an arms industry and an apparatus to support a huge standing army that subtly altered the political structure of the United States. Standing armies destroy federalism. They bring power to Washington, D.C. They require more wealth in order to maintain these armies. These are long service armies, 20 years or so. They have to be taken care of when they become redundant. Things of this sort. It alters the power picture radically, and that's, of course, what ultimately brought down the Roman Republic.
Attention all bases, attention all bases. This is Iron Hand. This is a SAC alert.
Who owns this place? Who owns General Electric? They make atom bombs. Well, how do they get the money to make them? And who's giving it to them? And why? To protect us from what? These are all questions that somebody like Obama should have been asking himself. It just didn't happen, the empire. It was designed. And those bases just came along like, you know, some terrible cancer.
When you see how much money's at stake in the operations that go on every day, it's phenomenal. The number of flights that take off from Kadena Air Force Base every single day. Just that one base in that one country on one day will have involved thousands of gallons of jet fuel, repair and maintenance and parts for those aircraft. The rationale for these bases is that they're continually practicing and training and using the equipment and running the personnel through their paces and feeding them and so on. And that is an incredibly expensive operation.
This is what President Eisenhower was warning against in his farewell address in 1961 when he invented the phrase military-industrial complex, meaning hidden power, power that was not really under the supervision of Congress, and that was often out of control, represented private interests rather than the national interest. I'm sorry to say that we in America did not pay attention to the warning he gave to us, and today it's close to out of control.
The United States consumes 1/4 of the world's oil every day, more than any other country, far more than any other country. The U.S. Department of Defense alone consumes as much petroleum as Sweden does on a daily basis. That's a huge amount that has to be procured day in, day out, 365 days a year. To safeguard that oil, the United States must have some capacity to protect it. And in this country, that job has been given to the military. And the military must have bases, naval bases, Air Force bases, and Army bases in the areas where the oil is located or along the supply routes.
If you look at the map collectively, there's an almost contiguous string of U.S. military bases from Poland to Pakistan in this really strategic middle ground between the emerging economic competitors of the United States, the European Union on one hand, and China and Japan on the other.
The U.S. has a formal policy of maintaining military dominance of the Persian Gulf area. It's called the Carter Doctrine. After President Jimmy Carter, he said, protection of the flow of Persian Gulf oil is a vital interest of the United States, and to protect that flow we'll use any means necessary, including military force. To that end, he said, we will need military bases in the Persian Gulf area, and he established military bases to support this policy of protecting the flow of Persian Gulf oil. And then wars were fought as well in line with that policy.
East and West are united in pioneering a new frontier of progress, serving the interest of the Saudi Arabs, serving the interest of the United States, and demonstrating the vitality of the American system of free enterprise. A system which, from this new frontier, is pumping into the trade of the world oil, one of the materials that is making a truly great contribution to our modern civilization.
The reason, in fact, primary one for the invasion of Iraq is to ensure U.S. control over the major energy resources of the world. The embassy that's being built inside Baghdad is a city. It's like no other embassy in history or in the world. They're not building the embassy and the city in Iraq and the huge bases around with an intention to leave. They're building them with an intention to maintain control.
Since 2003, the US has built dozens of military bases in Iraq. In 2008, the US and Iraqi governments signed an agreement that states that all foreign troops should leave the country by 2011. The agreement also says that the US will not seek permanent bases or a permanent military presence in Iraq. Obama's Secretary of Defense, Robert Gates, though, has stated that even after 2011, he expects to see several tens of thousands of American troops as part of a residual force in Iraq. Hence, many fear that Iraq may be used as a launching pad for future wars in the region. Often, in fact, bases created in response to an imminent threat have ended up becoming permanent. Diego Garcia, for example, born in the context of the Cold War, is still operational and has played a crucial role in the Iraq War.
They said in their feasibility study, that the island is not safe for the people to go there, to return there. But the thing is, Americans are living there and they have developed the island. And I even heard the island look like a little New York. And Americans are enjoying their lives there. Why should we not have the rights to go on our island and enjoy the same way they are doing?
Known by many as the Navy's best-kept secret because of its remote location, Diego Garcia is actually home to about 3,000 residents at any given time. There's also a unique assortment of quality-of-life opportunities to take advantage of on Diego Garcia. The island's athletic center is open round the clock with a wide range of workout equipment and a full-size gymnasium. Be sure to spend as much time as possible researching this informative website to help you prepare for what will certainly be a memorable assignment abroad.
By hosting U.S. bases, countries lose their sovereignty in a number of ways. You can do a very interesting kind of study in terms of the thickness of the SOFA, the Status of Forces Agreement. This is what's negotiated between the United States and so-called host nations. And it determines what kind of access the United States will have, what kind of political powers, what happens when U.S. soldiers commit crimes in these countries. And what you find is that the countries that have less power or leverage in relationship to the United States have much thinner sofas. In these countries, you'll find that when U.S. soldiers commit crimes, they're not held accountable. They're not tried under the law of the host nation. They're not put into prisons in the host nation. Often they're just brought out of the country back into the United States or deployed to a war zone because, as they say, boys will be boys, and these guys have been trained to be more aggressive, and so they were aggressive.
You're pumped, man. You're like shot up with steroids, you know? I mean, you're working out every day, man. You got guns, you got stuff, man. And so when you leave off the base, man, I mean, you're feeling pretty good about yourself, you know? I mean, you're feeling like you're a tough guy. You could kick anybody in the butt. So coming into town with that sort of attitude and getting kind of drunk, and then somebody looking at you the wrong way, you know, you just knock the hell out of them, you know? And, you know, you're a soldier, you're a Marine. I mean, they like that stuff. The military likes that stuff. They may say, well, we don't want our guys breaking local laws and causing problems for the local people. Bull crap. That's garbage. I mean, if that's the case, then you don't let us off the base. You let us off the base, there's going to be issues. I heard on the news one day about a Okinawan girl had been raped by United States military men. And I was very upset over this because I remember how we sort of treated the Okinawan people when I was here as an 18-year-old. And eventually some peace activists got in touch with me, and they had a contact here in Okinawa. And when they found out that I had been stationed here, they let the anti-base people here know that there's an ex-Marine who was stationed here who's doing peace work now in America. And so they invited me to come back to do a week of lectures. So that was 1996, and that's when I came back. And as we moved around the island and I saw the bases were still here, I just couldn't believe it. It's almost like a cancer here for these people. Since the end of World War II, these bases have been here. This is something the Americans should know. What happens when we open bases in other people's country? What kind of problems does it solve? Or does it cause more problems? And I think it does. I think people get really angry, you know, at this idea that we are policing the world. We have a right to put bases anywhere we want. We don't have foreign bases in America. We don't have any British base. We don't have any Korean base. We don't have any French bases, or, you know, we just all American bases. And for us, our bases are fine. The noise is our noise. It doesn't bother us at all because they're our bases. But for other people, it's a real problem.
これが今までのね、米軍の沖縄における事件事故のことですね。一番もうどれでも大変なことでしたけれども。でこれ時間がないので多くは書いていませんけれども。
待って、あんま変わらないの。
殺していいかしら。
超頑張ってるちっちゃい子たちみたいな。
この普天間の基地の大きさとかも実際の大きさではないけどさ、だいたいこっちにメートル書いたりとかして、このやっぱりね、周りのところが周りにはたくさんあって。
なこの保育園は300メートルも離れてないところにあるんですよ。でここはって言って飛行機が離着陸するところなんですよね。ですから特にこう低空飛行で飛行機が飛んでくるんですよ。で本当にヘリコプターなんか人の顔が見えるぐらい近づいてきますよ、低空飛行。もううるさい時は飛ぶ時は本当に朝からずっと夕方まで飛んでますよ。
最初の頃は夜泣きがあったり、それで園に来るのを怖い、嫌っていう子もいたり。
Perché sappiano che Vicenza non accetterà altre basi militari, ma non accetta neanche di vedere meccanismi di morte sui propri territori. E quindi siamo per lo smantellamento di queste strutture, perché chi ha le armi se ne vada ancora una volta a casa.
In 2007, the US revealed its plans for a new military base in Vicenza, Italy, just a few miles away from the city's historical center. Vicenza already hosts a US military base, the Caserma Ederle, home to the Southern European Task Force and one of 10 major US bases in Italy. The area designated for the new base is the ex-civilian airport Dal Molin. The plans for the new base include 48 buildings over 20 acres of land.
I couldn't give a damn about Vicenza, because in Vicenza you have 4 people in Vicenza, 3 of whom are over the age of 90, and the base in Vicenza is a nothing of a base. It doesn't generate smoke, noise, there are no planes landing. So anybody who complains in Vicenza, from my point of view, is a dirty commie, okay? But why? Because the Italian government, the region, the authorities have decided, yes, and they want to make a noise, even though these are entirely harmless people. It's like having tourists. They don't have tanks, they don't have helicopters, they don't crash airplanes on your head. So it's purely ideological and negativist by a bunch of people who don't do anything and are worthless.
In April 2008, Achille Variati is elected mayor of Vicenza, with the promise of holding a referendum on the new base. It is set to be held on October 5th, but just a few days before, the Italian Supreme Court blocks the referendum. Despite the court's decision, the citizens of Vicenza decide to hold an autonomous referendum, and on October 5th, 95% of the participants vote against the new base.
A me gli americani non stanno bene e lo vengo a esprimere qua, perché è quasi 70 anni che è finito la guerra, abbiamo ancora qui le truppe di occupazione.
Despite the clear opposition of the people of Vicenza, though, the Italian government gives the US the green light to go ahead with the new base. It's not unusual for the normal democratic process to be subverted when it comes to military bases. Most bases are in fact covered by secret treaties between the US and host nations. In Italy's case, this is the 1954 US-Italy bilateral agreement, never made public nor ratified by the Italian Parliament.
Allora cerchiamo, sta arrivando un altro camion, cerchiamo di stare tutti insieme. 俺たちが体止める理由わかる？こんな気持ちあなたにわかる？しかしな、僕らこんなにな、日本政府やアメリカ政府にいじめられてきてもな、俺たち沖縄の人がな、アメリカ人をこの歴史の中で殺したことがあるか？殺めたことがあるか？婦女暴行されな、ジェット機は落とされな、ヘリコプターは落とされな。この基地はそういう基地でしょう。この60年の苦しみをな、それに耐えてきているんだよ、僕らは。あなたは任務かもしれないな。我々はここでの歴史的な任務だよ。次の世代にこのような歴史を与えない。
When you go to elementary school, you're taught the Declaration of Independence. And if you're paying attention on the day that it's taught, you'll be taught that it says that King George III kept among us standing armies in times of peace that committed abuses and usurpations. I mean, this is language I can't make up. That this was a reason to declare independence from Britain and even to go to war.
Obama's election was hailed by many in the world as the beginning of a political phase radically different from that of the Bush administration. And in many ways it has been. But the ever-growing military budget, the escalation of the war in Afghanistan, the uncertainty surrounding the fate of the US bases in Iraq, and the plans for new military bases in a number of countries show how hard it is for this or any other president to challenge those policies that benefit the military-industrial complex and perpetuate US hegemony over the rest of the world. The US must now choose. Will it destine the country's dwindling resources to strengthen social and democratic institutions, or will it continue to fuel this parasitical complex that by definition can only produce new weapons and new wars?
ちょうどあっちが私の土地ですけれども、できたらその土地を早めに取り返して、そこを私はみんなにお願いして、大根を植えようと思っています。そうしたら5、6列植えるだけで120万本の大根ができるわけだから、沖縄の人たちにみんなに無料で配ろうと思っています。そして平和のためにこの土地は利用しようと。展望を持てば道は開けていく。展望もない奪われてもやむを得ないと混乱したら世の中は良くならんわけだから、我々が夢と希望を持って本来人間の生き方をじっくり、あらゆるところで訴えれば必ずこう道は開けると私は思っている。
だから別になんだ気張るというか大きな声を出していいんじゃなくて、ここできっちり一つでもそういうのに抵抗していくと。だからあくまでレジスタンですね。あれじゃなくてテロじゃなくてレジスタンスで考えています。
We're here to provide a safe and secure environment for everybody, regardless of what ethnic group they are, and to make sure that people have the freedom of movement, that kids can go to school, that people can go to work, and people can sleep safely. And we would like to see Kosovo develop and continue to grow, and there will be a point where K4 is no longer needed, and we look forward to that day. Okay. Any questions? Anything else? Did you get everything you needed?